This podcast deals with how the battles of 1857 were fought. The most important aspect of these battles was that Indians, the rebels to be more precise, were never comfortable facing the British Company's troops in the open. They always sought the safety and shelter of fortresses like Delhi or built up area like Lucknow, and very few battles were fought by the rebels in the open. The reason was simple. The first reason, some people, rather many people may not like it, was the fact that the rebels lacked moral courage. Why? One has to understand that the Bengal army rebels had been loyal British East India Company employees for 100 years. They had fought against every possible enemy, starting from Sirajuddaulah in 1757 to fighting Awadh in 1764, fighting and killing the Rohilla Pathans in 1774, fighting against Mysore, Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, fighting against the Marathas, fighting against the Afghans, fighting against the Sikhs, fighting against the Gwalior state, you name it. They had been loyal British Company servants for 100 years. And suddenly, by a jerk, they rebelled against the company, based, of course, on the foolish company's decisions of issuing them with the Enfield cartridges with cow fat and pig fat. That is a separate issue. Rebels had murdered British non combatants and their officers in cold blood. So naturally, there was the fear, the guilt, the fear of being punished, executed summarily. They lacked moral courage, although they used a lot of bhang and intoxicants to overcome this feeling. This is based on the recollections of my maternal grandfather, many of whose ancestors joined the rebellion as part of the cavalry regiments and as part of the horse artillery regiments. This is a hard fact, and normally even you don't find this in any book. But they lacked moral courage, number one. Number two, the rebels were basically JCOs of today, Subedars and Risaldars and Risaidars, and they had no training to handle troops. They had some basic, perhaps some idea, but they were not clued up. And this was the triumph of the British East India Company policy of not having the rebels in the officer rank. Now, this blunder was committed by the British in America when they allowed the American colonists to become officers, and of course, they were at par with the British Army when they rebelled in 1776. So, the comparison is very, very clear. Now, we will deal with some of the initial battles which definitely discouraged the rebels from facing the British Company in the open, pitched battles. As you can see, Brigadier Archdale Wilson starts from Meerut on 27th May 1857, as you can see, and he is going towards Ghaziabad, which is near Delhi. Already, as you can see, there are about 4 infantry battalions and 1 cavalry regiment and an artillery battery who have rebelled in Delhi, as you can see. Now, this is the first battle of Ghaziuddin Nagar. As you can see, the company's troops maneuvered from the northern flank, the right flank, and outflanked the rebels who had come to the Hindon River to face the company. As you can see in yellow, the rebels, their artillery guns, and the British company's 6th Dragoon, Wing, and Tombs horse artillery troop outflanked the rebels from the right, sweeping their entire line and rout them. As you can see, this was the first battle of Ghaziuddin Nagar. A harsh lesson for the rebels, naturally, who had no clue about maneuver, about operational leadership. So, the first battle of Ghaziuddin Nagar. As you can see, the action of 31st May 1857, the second battle of Ghaziuddin Nagar was mostly an artillery battle. As you can see, that two 18-pounder guns of Lieutenant Lights fire and turn the table. Two 18-pounder guns, heavy guns, as you can see, and on the flank are Tombs 6-pounder horse artillery guns, as you can see, and these are the rebel position across the Hindon River on a ridge, and Wilson deploys artillery in force to counter bombard and silence the rebel artillery, as you can see, an artillery duel. And two guns of Major Scott's battery are also added to reinforce fire. As you can see, 31st May 1857 and action of 31st May 1857 at Ghaziuddin Nagar, Wilson orders attack by 5 companies of the 60th Rifles, the Carabiniers, and rebels flee the battlefield. As you can see, a straightforward frontal attack by 5 companies of the 60th Rifles, straightforward, after the artillery fire, and the rebels flee the battle. This is the second battle of Ghaziuddin Nagar. As you can see, now we will go to the more decisive, again a Mickey Mouse battle, the Battle of Ghaziuddin Nagar, Battle of Badli Ki Sarai, correction. Now, as you can see, General Anson's organization of his army to advance towards Delhi was as below. He organized his troops into Ambala Brigade, 1st Ambala Brigade, as you can see, 2 squadrons of Her Majesty 9th Lancers, Her Majesty 75th Foot, 1st Europeans of the British East India Company's private army, 2/3 horse artillery troop, 6 guns. This is the 1st Ambala Brigade under, as you can see, this is the 2nd Ambala Brigade. As you can see, the 1st Ambala Brigade is under Halifax. Now you can see the 2nd Ambala Brigade, which is under Jones, again 2 squadrons of Her Majesty's 9th Lancers, the squadron of 4th Native Cavalry, whose loyalty was a bit dubious, but they were there. The 2nd Europeans, the British Company's private army, 60th Native Infantry, again whose loyalty was dubious, and 3/3 artillery troop, 6 guns, 9-pounder European troop. And third, as you can see, this is the Meerut Brigade who had fought earlier at the Battle of Ghazi Abad, which we discussed earlier. And they had crossed the Jamna River and had joined the main British Company's army at about Alipur, south of Karnal. This was the Meerut Brigade. They had a wing of Her Majesty 1/60 rifles, two squadrons of Her Majesty's 6 Dragoon Guards, the Carabiniers, 2/1 horse artillery troop of the famous Toombs, 6 guns. Toombs were number 2 then, but he was there. Number 14 Field Artillery Battery, 120 siege artillery gunners and Indian sappers. So now we will go to the battle of Ghaziuddin of Badli Ki Sarai. As you can see, again the company outflanked the rebels. As you can see, the forces were very small, but as you can see, there were two outflanking moves from the right and the left. As you can see clearly, 2nd Brigade Grants coming from the western flank and the other brigade coming from the eastern flank, and a frontal attack in the center. The rebel position was very narrow, about 600 yards, something like that. As you can see, they were outflanked. Most of the fighting in this battle was on the right wing. As you can see, on the right wing, Grant's wing. Thus, most of the company's casualties were on the right wing of attack. The Carabiniers also lost 2 other ranks killed at this battle. However, anyhow, so this is just to illustrate these 3 battles, 2 at the Ghaziabad and the third at Badli Ki Sarai, totally discouraged the rebels in future from facing the British Company's army in the open. They did some maneuvers like at Najafgarh later on, but again they took defensive positions and they never attacked the British Company. Of course, the lack of moral courage, number 1, and number 2, the lack of military training. And Hope Grant, who faced the rebels, described them as so idiotic and so low IQ that he said that any maneuver against them was possible. They were so dumb and they were so poor in military talent and operational strategy that any strategy was possible against them. So, pitched battle, there were no pitched battles. Most of the rebel battles, the biggest battle was Delhi, and they fought Delhi behind the safety of a fortress, which of course had been improved and strengthened by the British Company, Delhi. Again at Lucknow, the battles were fought in the built up area, in close ranges. Another very important factor which discouraged the rebels very strongly from fighting in the open was the fact that they were totally outranged by the British Company's Enfield rifles. The rebels had Brown Bess, which had only 100 yards effective range, while with the Enfield rifles, the British Company could hit them from as far away as 1 kilometer. So this was also a very important point. Plus, the Enfield rifle had very high muzzle velocity and was very accurate. So the rebels, of course, had no chance against the Enfield rifle. And as the famous East India Company civil servant wrote in his book, The Punjab in the Peace and War, that if the rebels had accepted the Enfield rifle and then mutinied, the British battles and the British contest against the rebels could have been much harder. So this is just to give you an idea how the battles were fought. And another last instance, that Nemoch Brigade tried an outflanking maneuver on 19 June 1857, but they were defeated by just a cavalry attack. And the lack of moral courage was so much that they were dispersed within no time. As you can see, Her Majesty's 9th Lancers attacked them, and of course, this Nemoch Brigade was dispersed, and this was one of the greatest cavalry charges of 1857. Again, as you can see, with the good combination of artillery, the British company was able to defeat every rebel counter move against them. As you can see, this is the Battle of Najafgarh, where again the rebels took a defensive position. And here again they lacked so much moral courage that this character Bakht Khan, he never even joined the battle. There were two rebel brigades, the Nemoch Brigade and the Bareilly Brigade, and Bareilly Brigade did not even join the battle. They stayed at Palam. As you can see, Bareilly Brigade halts at Palam rather than supporting Nemoch Brigade. And Nemoch Brigade fought the battle alone and of course was destroyed by Nicholson, as you can see, on 25th August 1857. So such was the lack of moral courage and such was the irresolution that this character Bakht Khan did not even join the rebel brigade giving battle to Nicholson. If they had joined, the outcome may have been more difficult for the company. Can't say they would have won, but more difficult. As you can see, this is the march of Nicholson's force. Again the rebels have taken a defensive position. No question of attack or maneuver. Even in 65 and 71 war, the Indian or Pakistan army were very poor in offensive maneuvers. They were very good in defense, a much more simpler form of war, but total failures in offensive maneuvers. As you can see, the Nemoch Brigade is deployed like this. These are just small examples just to show how the rebels lacked the basic operational talent, the basic tactical precepts to face the British company's army, and in any case they were going to be a failure. On the whole, if you study Indian military history, all opponents of the British company except the Sikhs were defeated in pitched battles in forces having over a brigade. Hyder Ali was defeated, Tipu was defeated, Marathas were defeated, even the Sikhs were defeated in most of the battles. Of course, Ranjit Singh had blundered by selecting a Brahman from Meerut and a shopkeeper from Jhelum, so that was one reason. The only exception was Chilianwala, where because of British stupidity, Gough, was a very hot-headed man. They suffered a serious setback. But again, Chilianwala was not a British defeat, it was a draw. Because although the British failed to break through, it rained the same night and both the armies withdrew to their base areas, and Chilianwala was also a draw. So you can imagine how pathetic the Indians were against the British. There is much exaggeration, but these are some of the hard facts. These narrations may not be liked by people, but one cannot just whitewash history, and this is just an illustration how the now give you small example about the assault on Delhi also, that the rebels even lacked the operational talent to counterattack. The British historians admitted that after the first day's assault on Delhi, the British had still not established a complete hold inside Delhi, and the British soldiers had looted the wine shops, the liquor shops, and were dead drunk. And the British admitted that if the rebels had launched a counterattack, the British army's very existence, the company's army's existence would have been in peril. But again, the rebels were so dumb that they had no operational insight. Of course, there were JCOs, Subadars, Risaldars, and not much military talent was accepted from them. The surprising part is that the Indian and Pakistan armies, despite all the training and grooming, were also total failures in attack in the 65 and 71 war, and the mediocrity persists. But more of this later. I have discussed this subject in my book Pakistan Army in 1965 and 71 War, and more on this later on.